1 year ago, I made this illustration. This is pretty much where everything started. I dabbled in art a bit before, but it was kind of something I just did every once in a while if I felt like it. But then, I started getting ideas about what I could do with art, beyond just drawing porn. I thought, you know what, why not? Let's try to take this a bit more seriously. So let's go through it all. The whole year, one project at a time, to see if anything changed. Starting with, that one. I made it on a reference image that I took on a trip, and it's... Now, okay, before I go full hater mode on my past self, there is stuff to still like about this. The composition and atmosphere are pretty strong. There's a clear vibe that I wanted to get across here, and I think it kind of worked out. But you can definitely see a lack of experience here. The folds on the clothing are just bad, some of the lighting makes no sense, and the whole thing just looks flat. I genuinely really like working in black and white. It has a certain feel to it, and the limitations force it to be more creative, which it clearly wasn't. It just looks boring, because there isn't any depth or variety here. It's all pretty much the same shade of grey. Or is it? See, there's another hidden problem here. There's actually very little grey in this image. If we zoom in a bit, it's all made using screen tones. Those very small dots and patterns that you can see up close, but zooming back out, mostly blend into a solid color. We'll get into exactly why this is such a big issue soon in the next section, but I want to quickly end this one first. Overall, this one is certainly something. Not the worst I've done and a pretty good start, but I've just gotten so jaded over time that I can't like it anymore. Solid 5 out of 10. I'll probably remake it at some point like I did some others. Let's immediately get into the issue, because you can probably already see it. Screen tones. Why are they a problem here? It's actually pretty simple, but I didn't even think about it until after finishing these two. Screen tones are just a lot of small details. What that means is that I have no idea what you are seeing right now. These dots are supposed to imitate a shade of grey when zoomed out, but the exact shade of grey you see is gonna depend on things like your screen resolution, the pixel density, some other buzzwords, and even the way that this video gets compressed when exporting and uploading. A big part of the appeal of drawing in black and white for me is that I don't need to worry about the color settings on people's monitors. Everything should just look mostly the same everywhere. So using tones just recreates that issue, in a way I don't know how to get around. 4 out of 10. I'm never using them again. This one is just a quick sketch I was particularly happy with. Nothing groundbreaking, but it was a nice little experiment with drawing hair and pre-existing designs, which I think went pretty well. I also made a colored version a few months later. I don't like it nearly as much as the sketch, but it's not terrible. I tried to switch up styles a bit and do it without line art, which didn't really work, but hey, at least I learned something.
You big singers are fucking...
Just looking at this one again is giving me physical pain, so let's not spend too long on it. I guess a lot of this was about pushing myself in some ways, mostly by having multiple characters in the same space and interacting with props, neither of which I've really done before. And I think it came out pretty okay. A lot of it may not necessarily look good, but at least it's good enough for me to believe that these two are actually holding what they're holding. The composition is also still surprisingly fine. There isn't that much wasted space, even with the environment being as empty as it is. But then the colors are pretty boring, I should have made the lighting more pronounced, and some of the perspective is just straight up wrong. 6 out of 10, not bad. Okay, this one's particularly important. Remember this part? I dabbled in art a bit before, but it was kind of something I just did every once in a while if I felt like it. There is one exception. I made this on New Year's, at the very end of 2021. Google 2021. Holy hell. Which means that this is technically the oldest finished illustration I have. And it's pretty bad, but that's not important. What is that this is also the first in the small line of concept art I've been making, which made it significant enough for me to want to remake. So, exactly 1 year later, I made this. And this one, I'm still pretty happy with, surprisingly. Yeah, it's very simple and abstract, but like, come on, it's pretty cool. The angle and composition are different, but the previous one just stopped working for what this was supposed to be for. I mean, this one doesn't work either anymore, but I still like it for what it is. I don't know, I don't have much to say about this one. Yeah, the light streaks look kinda clunky and could have been done better. This ear somehow faded through the hair, and I'm gonna have to redesign this whole guy at some point, but it surprisingly holds up. 7 out of 10. I will probably remake it again in a few months. Okay, this one's a lot more mixed. Come on, the video can't be this positive for that long. The retention is gonna flatline. So, across everything I've made so far, and with how many times I've mentioned it, you can definitely see a common theme here. I am 100% a man of atmosphere. Trying to create a strong feeling for composition and lighting is by far my favorite thing to do, and this exemplifies that especially well. The technical aspects could be a lot better, like all the folds and the clothes aren't great, and nothing that was supposed to be soft really looks like it is, because I just don't know how to draw that. These fingers are especially horrible. I never bothered fixing them, because I thought the shadows were gonna be a lot darker so you wouldn't be able to actually see them, but obviously you still can. Then again, Does that really even matter? I mean, this isn't an anatomy study. The focus here clearly isn't on making sure that every little detail looks right. While it would be cool if everything did look right, I think I can look past it, because it wasn't the point. All of this could be a massive cope, but the first time you look at something like this, your eyes are just gonna be drawn to the big light and what is hitting. Then hopefully that's gonna invoke some feelings, and if you look longer you might notice the second light, and connect the dots on how this character is powering the lamp if you know some of the context. But you probably won't really look at some fingers and go, yeah! Immediately. I don't know, it feels like coming off of the last video and writing this script I underwent some sort of character arc. 7 out of 10.
7-Eleven, bitch!
This one was another step into the unknown. Not only the first real full-body illustration, but also a bigger redesign of an existing character, which was pretty fun to do. Although I'm not really sure how I feel about it as a whole, for as much as I just went on about atmosphere a second ago, I think that's sorely missing here. It doesn't really have one, especially with the questionable at the best color choices. Everything just sort of clashes with everything else. The pose is pretty boring too, and nothing is really happening. It's not conveying anything, which is very disappointing looking back. But I also learned a good bit while working on this, like adjustment layers for the colors, or the existence of color jitter for the grass. And for what it's worth, I do think the outfit is pretty cool, even if I could have done a lot more with it. 6 out of 10. I don't like the background. Now this is a big one. By far the most complex, high-effort illustration I've made up to this point. The origin story here is that every few months there's this themed illustration contest where you can win crazy amounts of money. I wasn't actually expecting to win anything, but I thought that participating would be a good way to push myself. The theme for this one in particular was magic. And no, I don't know what came over me to immediately think of a wandering trader witch, but that's what I went with. The idea here is kinda twofold. On one hand, you have the foreground. I just drew a pretty basic witch and added a bunch of smoke to make her look more mystical, like she just kind of appeared in front of you like a salesman. And then, on the other hand, you have the focal point. And holy fuck, all this took a while. I wanted to make the entire shop very dense and varied, not necessarily full of magical items, but just full of stuff. Which was actually a terrible idea because the contest submissions have a file size limit, which means that all those details I spent time on ended up looking like this, since the image had to be compressed. And that sucks because some of the small stuff I enjoyed doing just disappeared. Like all these weird potions or the whole idea of this panel, how all those pillars are individual portals to places, and this is set to the purple one, because that's the one that's active and open, you're literally looking through it. Overall, out of 10. Too many things. I'm not gonna spend long on this one because it was a whole mess. It was another installment in that small line of concept art I mentioned before. The TLDR is that I had an idea, didn't have the skill, spent 4 months ripping my hair out and then gave up. I already made a whole video about it, so I'm not gonna repeat everything I said there. Looking back, even just a month later, it's not as bad as I thought it was. I still hate the bottom left section, but the middle is pretty cool, and the guy looks almost as unhinged as I wanted. 2 out of 10 for the experience. And finally, we arrive at not quite the end of the timeline, but the most recent thing I've finished. Quite possibly the best one too. This was another contest illustration, like the one before the one I said I wouldn't talk about. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it kind of combines everything I've talked about today. We have pretty strong atmospheric lighting, slightly more complex hair physics, multiple characters interacting with props, some outfit variety, and even the color palette and some of the sheer clutter of these two. It sort of feels like all the different things I experimented with before finally came together. Which, yeah, that's the whole point of developing skills, but it's still cool to think about. Though a big focus here was specifically on character expressions, which I haven't really done before besides this guy. And they came out pretty okay. Yeah, all the characters are playing cards, but this one is super into it and just had a breakthrough. This one is scheming, this one is just done with it all, and this one is getting a heat stroke. Of course, a lot of this could be improved. The shadows have gotten better, but some of them still don't really look good. The ground looks too hard and flat. I could have done way more of the outfits, and I can't place my finger on exactly why or how, but some of the perspective just seems off to me. Though, overall, pretty solid. 9 out of 10. This hair is the best thing I've ever done. And just like that, we have reached the true end of the timeline. We've gone through everything. So, now I guess the question is, where do we go from here? What's the plan? And this is gonna sound really stupid, so just bear with me for a second. I think I wanna make less stuff. All those illustrations we went through, which there aren't even that many of, are pretty much all I did in the last year. While I did improve by just making thing after thing after thing, I feel like I could have done that much faster if I put some time and effort into practicing in between. So that's the idea. For the next year, I want to focus more on learning things, sort of set up my future self for making things better and faster. I especially want to learn some basic anatomy, which is definitely gonna take a while. That will probably be a set of videos on its own. And if I'm still doing this a year from now, then you can do a follow-up and see just how badly it all went. But until then, I'll just have to keep trying. Oh, actually, because this is gonna take a while to edit, future me should already be drawing for the next video. Let's see how he's doing.